About 6 years ago, in the middle of all my other campaigns, a local resident called Gillian Ward came to see me, and she asked me if I would help their campaign. And I had always had a particular place in my heart for the abuse of the elderly. And this began years ago when I opened the refuge in Chiswick. It was the first refuge for victims of domestic violence. And Nan was my eldest woman who'd come in, and she was 82, and she was battered by her son. Her husband had been a batterer, and the second son had left and created a new life for himself. But the son that battered her, she felt a huge amount of guilt because she hadn't left. She hadn't been able to leave her husband, who was a doctor at that time. And of course in those days there was really nowhere to go if you didn't have family who'd take you in. So Nan used the refuge as her second home. Well, eventually, because nobody would do anything to protect Nan, he kicked her to death and she died. And I have never forgotten her, and I've always felt that in a strange way, when Gillian came into my life, that this was a moment when I could contribute to what was happening in England, which was a long-term epidemic of abuse practiced in private nursing homes. Now, for a long time, although it wasn't always perfect, most nursing homes were run by the National Health Service under the government umbrella and were extremely accountable. They had to be, just like hospitals are and prisons, institutions. But then came the advent of what I call asset strippers. Americans call them carpetbaggers. They're men mostly who come in to buy these private nursing homes and play profit and hopefully no loss with the elder and the suffering people in their private homes. And the first thing they do is to cut the budgets to the bone and employ the least employable people, most of whom don't speak English properly, aren't able to read, and certainly have no background of vocationally wanting to care for anyone. They take the jobs because they have to, and they often resent the elderly and the fragile because they don't want to be there anyway. And this is a recipe for total disaster. The 12 members of the Lindenhouse Relatives group had lost people they loved in a private nursing home in Twickenham. And they formed this group, and we began the long-term battle to get something done about this particular nursing home. Now, I've always said, when the loss of innocence happens, it's the beginning of politics. And the 12 people who came to me now, it's about 6 years ago, are not the same people now as they were then. Because suddenly, the truth about the British establishment and how the vested interests are run in this country was sharply delineated when they had to begin to take action to get something done. Because you have to remember, for everyone who fails to take care of their loved ones, who allows because they're too frightened to speak out, who has to suffer watching what can happen in these private nursing homes, they carry with them this massive burden of guilt. And it's not surprising that we lost one of our group to suicide. She let it be known that she killed herself because she could not face what had happened to her uncle, who she tried to protect in this home, when it became her turn to take up one of these beds, in which will virtually always now be private nursing homes, as slowly the National Health has handed over all responsibility for the elderly and the fragile members of our community. I believe a civilization is measured by its care for the fragile, for the children and the elderly, and England, apart from all our other problems, has failed drastically to take care. The only way forward I could see, having had a massive battle myself and fought many campaigns, is that we cannot allow private enterprise to make money out of elderly people suffering in their hands. We have to battle, as far as I'm concerned, to make the National Health Service responsible again for the homes for the elderly.